Clint Eastwood has always been a man of few words, but when he speaks, people listen. His voice carries decades of experience, of stories told through film rather than interviews, of emotions expressed more through silence than explanation. Over a career that spans generations, Eastwood has worked alongside countless women, each bringing something different to the screen and to the moments behind it. When he once reflected on the women he found most beautiful, it wasn't framed as a list meant to provoke or impress. It was framed as memory, as recognition, as an understanding that beauty, at its deepest level, is something you feel long before you try to define it. For Eastwood, beauty was never confined to appearance alone. He had spent too many years on sets to believe that the camera told the whole story. He had seen how lighting could flatter, how angles could deceive, and how surface perfection often faded the moment the director called cut. What stayed with him were the women who brought something more enduring into the room: confidence without arrogance, strength without noise, vulnerability without performance. These were the qualities that shaped his idea of beauty, and they were the thread that connected the 7 women he later spoke about with quiet admiration. One of those women stood out for her calm intensity. She didn't dominate scenes by force, but by presence. Eastwood remembered how she listened more than she spoke, how her stillness could carry as much weight as dialogue. On screen, audiences felt drawn to her, not because she demanded attention, but because she held it effortlessly. Her beauty, in his eyes, was rooted in restraint, in knowing when to step forward and when to let silence do the work. Another woman on his list carried an entirely different energy. She was warm, expressive, and unafraid of emotion. Eastwood admired how she brought openness into every interaction, how she allowed herself to feel deeply, even in an industry that often rewards detachment. Her beauty was alive, changing from moment to moment, shaped by laughter, curiosity, and empathy. Being around her reminded him that beauty could be generous, something that reached outward rather than standing apart. There was also a woman whose elegance felt timeless, not tied to a particular era or trend, but anchored in self-assurance. Eastwood noticed how she moved with purpose, how she seemed comfortable in her own history. She didn't chase relevance. It followed her naturally. Her beauty wasn't about youth or novelty. It was about continuity, about remaining true to herself while the world around her shifted. One name he mentioned surprised people, not because she lacked admiration, but because his reasoning was so deeply personal. He spoke about her resilience, about how she navigated pressure with dignity. In moments when others might have retreated or hardened, she remained grounded. Her beauty, Eastwood believed, came from endurance, from the quiet strength required to keep showing up without losing yourself. It was the kind of beauty that grows over time, shaped by experience rather than circumstance. Another woman represented simplicity. Eastwood recalled moments when she appeared without effort, without adornment, and yet seemed completely luminous. There was no sense of performance in her presence. She was comfortable as she was, and that comfort translated into an ease that filled the space around her. For Eastwood, this was a reminder that beauty often emerges when nothing is forced, when authenticity is allowed to breathe. Intellect also played a role in his reflections. One of the women he named was admired as much for her mind as for her appearance. Conversations with her were layered, thoughtful, and challenging. She asked questions that lingered, offered perspectives that shifted the room. Eastwood respected how she brought intelligence into every aspect of her work. Her beauty, he felt, was amplified by curiosity and insight. It wasn't just something you saw, it was something you engaged with. The final woman on his list embodied transformation. Eastwood had watched her evolve publicly, growing into her own sense of identity over time. Rather than resisting change, she embraced it. Her beauty matured, gaining depth and complexity. He admired how she allowed herself to be shaped by life rather than frozen by expectation. In her journey, he saw proof that beauty doesn't fade. When it changes, it deepens. What made Eastwood's reflections resonate was not the fame of the women he mentioned, but the consistency of his perspective. He never spoke about perfection. He spoke about presence, about the feeling someone leaves behind when they exit a room, about how certain people alter the rhythm of a space simply by being in it. These women, in different ways, had done exactly that. Eastwood understood that Hollywood often confuses visibility with value. He had seen faces celebrated one year and forgotten the next. What stayed with him were the people who brought integrity into their work, who treated others with respect regardless of status, who understood that lasting impact isn't created by chasing attention. The women he named shared that quality. Their beauty wasn't loud, but it was enduring. He once suggested that time is the truest test of beauty. Time strips away pretense and reveals what remains. The women he admired had passed that test in his eyes. They remained compelling, not because they stayed the same, but because they stayed true. They adapted without losing themselves, evolved without erasing their essence. There was also humility in Eastwood's reflections. He never positioned himself as an authority on beauty. He acknowledged that his perspective was shaped by his experiences, his values, his mistakes. He understood that beauty is deeply personal, filtered through memory and emotion. His list wasn't meant to instruct others. It was meant to honor moments that mattered to him. In speaking about these women, Eastwood also revealed something about himself, a preference for depth over spectacle, for authenticity over performance, for people who didn't need to announce their worth. His admiration was rooted in respect rather than fascination. He didn't speak as someone looking from a